I'm about to graduate high school now, but this story happened when I was in second grade. Some details might be fuzzy, but the conversation with our vice principal is burned into my memory forever. And yes, I really wish I could say this was made up. When I was around 7, I got bullied. A lot. The main reason was because the year before, I had developed something called Majaki's granuloma. It's where my body took a form of ringworm and mutated it. It wasn't contagious, but it looked really gross and weird, which made me an easy target. There was this group of boys who would pick on me, but none was worse than this one kid. He would taunt me, steal my stuff, eat my food, call me names. You name it. One weird thing about him though, he got random nosebleeds all the time. I think it was because he picked his nose too much, but I'm not sure. All I know is that multiple times a day, he'd run to the teacher dripping blood and would get sent to the nurse's office. After recess, we would line up according to our classes. This kid and I were in the same class, but his little gang was in a different one. The area where we lined up had a little rock border with a bunch of tiny pebbles. One day, when the teachers weren't looking, his gang started throwing pebbles at me, and then he started pulling my hair. I pulled my arm up in front of my face to block the pebbles and stood up so he couldn't pull my hair anymore. Well, this jerk didn't let go. Or maybe I stood up too fast, I don't know. So he fell flat on his face. I didn't see this because I still had my arm covering my face. All I know is I started hearing him scream bloody murder. The kid had blood pouring down his face. Our teacher came running over to ask what happened. I'll never forget what that little jerk said. He stammered out that I had punched him, which was completely false. I immediately denied it, telling the teacher I hadn't touched him at all. I didn't have many friends because of my skin condition, but this kid had his whole gang who enthusiastically backed up his story. So I got dragged to the principal's office and had a frustrating conversation with the vice principal. The vice principal demanded to know why I had hit the boy. I kept insisting that I hadn't touched him. When she asked why all the other kids were saying I did, I explained they were just his friends backing him up. She then asked how he got a bloody nose if I hadn't hit him, and I told her he fell on his face. The vice principal didn't believe me, saying that falling wouldn't cause a nosebleed like that, and kept pressing me about hitting him. This back and forth went on for quite a while, with her not believing anything I said. Finally, I got so fed up that I falsely admitted to hitting him. When she asked why I had lied before, I told her I wasn't actually lying, but it was clear she wouldn't believe anything else. I was a pretty sassy kid back then, so I got my first in-school suspension. I was told I'd have to sit in the detention room for a week. I didn't care too much, honestly. But then her came in. My mom, the bully's mom, and a police officer who patrolled our school district, who I'll call officer, had to join us in the principal's office, since this could technically be considered assault. And let me tell you, this woman was insane. The principal started by thanking everyone for coming and explaining that disciplinary action had already been determined, but he wanted to hear if the parents had anything else to say. Before he could finish, the bully's mom interrupted by demanding that the officer arrest me immediately, pointing her finger right at me. The officer was caught off guard and asked what she meant. The bully's mom called me a menace to society who needed to be detained. The principal politely asked her not to use that language in front of children, but she didn't back down. Instead, she blamed the principal, saying none of this would have happened if he had done his job properly. Our principal didn't take nonsense from anyone. He told the bully's mom that if she had taught her child not to bully others, we wouldn't be in this situation at all. The bully's mom got defensive and claimed her son had never bullied anyone in his life. The principal then nodded at me to tell my side of the story. I explained that the boy's friends were throwing rocks at me and he was pulling my hair. The bully's mom got angry and accused me of lying about her son just to get out of trouble. My mom jumped in to defend me, telling the bully's mom not to speak to me that way and explaining that I had told her multiple times about what her son had been doing. The bully's mom insulted my mom, calling her a liar and saying that's where I got my lying from. My parents are both from New Jersey and have that fighting spirit. My mom told the bully's mom to stop cursing because her kid already had enough bad habits. She also told her to stop trying to get me arrested just because her son was a bully. My mom acknowledged that I shouldn't have hit him, even though I didn't, but said it would be understandable if I had. The bully's mom was outraged by this. She insisted her son would never hurt anyone and suggested I should be sent to a special school for autistic kids since I clearly couldn't handle normal schools. For context, I have ADHD, ADD, ODD, and a mild form of autism. The officer stepped in and asked the bully's mom to calm down. She responded by insulting him and telling him to do his job. The officer then asked her to leave. She refused, saying she wouldn't go until I was either arrested or placed in a different school. The officer told her to leave immediately while holding out a pair of handcuffs. The bully's mom went white but stormed off with her son in tow. The principal apologized profusely and said the boy would be punished as well. My mom kissed me goodbye and went home. And that's where our story should end. Should. A few hours later, school got out. I lived literally 5 minutes from school and was old enough to walk home myself. So that was the plan. I got out and started walking when I felt a sharp tug on my backpack. Surprise, surprise. It was the bully's mom. She demanded that I come with her right that moment. I refused and told her to let me go because I was going home. She said no and told me that we were going to the police station. I was terrified because I had left from the side of the building instead of the front, so there weren't many people around us. Then I remembered what my mom told me to do if someone ever tried to kidnap me. I screamed at the top of my lungs, so loud I lost my voice for days afterward, repeating over and over that she wasn't my mom. The bully's mom grabbed my face, covering my mouth with her hand, and threatened that I was going to get what I deserved. I honestly thought I was going to die. There I was, being held by this crazy woman and dragged to her minivan. She grabbed my face so hard it left marks. I was sure I was done for. I started crying, thinking I'd never see my family again. And then my savior appeared. The officer spotted us and demanded to know what she was doing. It turns out he had parked his patrol car next to the side exit. The bully's mom told him that since he wouldn't do his job, she was taking me to find a police officer who would. The officer, who really didn't take nonsense, told her she was under arrest. The bully's mom's jaw hit the floor. She let me go and tried to run, but the officer caught her easily. He put her in his car and called my parents. While we waited, he calmed me down and gave me a little Dalmatian stuffed animal. I named him Patch and still cuddle with him every night. After my mom arrived, the officer explained what happened and asked if my mom wanted to press charges. My mom obviously said yes. Two other police officers, who were incredibly kind, asked me what happened. The bully's mom was charged with assault, attempted kidnapping, and resisting arrest. That officer has patrolled all 3 schools in my area, elementary, middle, and high school. So I've basically grown up with him watching over me. I'm 18 now, and he even came to my graduation party. That woman ended up serving 6 months in jail and lost custody of her son, who went to live with his dad and eventually transferred to another school district. I never saw either of them again. I work as a lab technician at the local hospital, and that particular day had been exhausting already. I've been called in on my day off because of a major car accident that required all hands on deck for processing blood work. When the emergency call came, I've been in the middle of shopping, so I rushed to the hospital in my casual clothes, jeans, and a worn-out band t-shirt rather than my usual scrubs. After 4 straight hours of rushing samples and running tests, I desperately needed a break before my regular shift started. My old Kindle had died the week before, so I'd borrowed my wife's tablet, an old Samsung with a distinctive cartoon character case that she loved. I settled into the cafeteria with a coffee and opened up my ebook, trying to get a few minutes of peace. I was deep into my book when I felt a tug on my elbow. Looking up, I found a young boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, staring at the tablet with wide eyes. The boy asked me if I had games on what he thought was my iPad. I explained to him that it wasn't actually an iPad, just a boring tablet for old people that only had books on it. I looked around for his parents but didn't see anyone watching him. The cafeteria was fairly busy, and kids often get separated from their families in the hospital. The boy looked disappointed and wandered off. I went back to my reading, not thinking much of the interaction. A few minutes later, my phone alarm buzzed, my 5-minute warning to get back to the lab. I quickly went to the coffee machine for one last refill, foolishly leaving the tablet on the table with my jacket. When I returned, The tablet was gone. I patted my pockets and checked under the table, but it had vanished. As I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the counter to ask if anyone had seen it, I spotted the same little boy from earlier leaving with a woman I assumed was his mother. In his hands was a tablet with a distinctive cartoon character case. I quickly walked over to them. I politely told the woman that I believed her son had my tablet that I'd left on the table. The woman smiled politely but seemed confused. There was a language barrier, and she didn't appear to understand what I was saying. I awkwardly mimed that the tablet belonged to me, pointing at it and then to myself. She spoke to her son in their language, and he immediately started whining and clutching the tablet to his chest. I thought the situation would resolve itself. The mother seemed to understand what was happening, and I expected her to make her son return my property. That's when the father appeared. He was a short man who seemed to materialize out of nowhere, jabbing his finger at me and immediately raising his voice. He demanded repeatedly to know what I was doing. I explained that his son had taken my tablet from my table and that I just wanted it back. The father became even more agitated, repeatedly insisting that his son was not a thief and telling me to leave. I kept my voice calm and my hands at my sides, trying to de-escalate the situation, but the father was getting increasingly agitated. He accused me of being racist and continued to deny that his son had stolen anything, all while demanding that I leave immediately. He kept repeating himself, getting louder each time. Someone must have called security because a guard appeared and headed straight for us. I was relieved at first, thinking the situation would finally be resolved. To my surprise, the father immediately started speaking rapidly to the security guard in their shared language. The mother nodded along, occasionally adding something. I waited patiently for my turn to explain. The security guard turned to me with a stern expression. He instructed me to step aside and let the family leave. When I protested and pointed out that they had my tablet, the guard told me that the family claimed I had been harassing the mother and child. He threatened to call the police and restrain me if I didn't move aside. I looked at the boy still clutching my wife's tablet with the unmistakable cartoon cover, then back at the security guard. Something in me snapped. I told the guard that I would comply but warned him that I was calling his boss and that he would be responsible for allowing my property to be stolen. The family shuffled past me toward the exit while I pulled out my phone. The security guard seemed smug, already holding his own phone out. He thought I was going to call the general security line, which would route to him as the nearest officer. Instead, I dialed his supervisor directly, one of the perks of working after hours and knowing the staff. I asked Dave, the security supervisor, if he was aware that his officers were allowing thieves to walk out of the hospital while detaining the people they'd robbed. I gave Dave a full rundown, including the security guard's name several times. The guard's face went pale as he realized who I was talking to. Dave confirmed the details with the camera room and radioed other guards to stop the family at the exit. I hung up and looked at the now nervous security guard. I asked him sarcastically if he now felt like helping me get my tablet back. He took off running. I called my manager to explain the situation, who told me to take my time sorting it out. About 5 minutes later, security returned with the family, but without my tablet. When I asked what happened to it, one of the new security guards explained that the father had taken it from his son and smashed it on the ground when confronted. Dave had collected the broken pieces in a plastic bag and called the police. The father was still insisting there was no proof the device, which he incorrectly called an iPod, was mine, even as Dave walked him through the cafeteria pointing out all the security cameras. By the time the police arrived, reviewed the footage, and inspected the destroyed tablet, the father's smugness had disappeared. The police issued him a fine and charged him with theft and destruction of property. What could have been a simple, "please give that back" moment turned into a 3-hour ordeal before I could return to work. Thankfully, Dave filed an incident report, so I still got paid for my time. A few days later, I received a call from a lawyer representing the family the father had been visiting. The lawyer sent a check that covered not just a replacement tablet, but allowed my wife to upgrade to a top-of-the-line model with accessories. The lawyer asked if I would write a letter describing the charges as a cultural misunderstanding to help with the father's future visa applications. I declined, believing that being entitled and destroying someone else's property crosses all cultural boundaries. The security guard personally delivered a sincere apology letter, explaining that he trusted the father's story without verification. Dave put him on probation and required him to redo his training. I accepted his apology. We all make mistakes, and I believe in second chances if people learn from them. And I replaced my broken Kindle with a new one. At least it doesn't look like an iPad, so hopefully it won't attract any more entitled parents and their children. I bought my house in Pinecrest Estates 5 years ago. It was a nice neighborhood with good schools nearby, perfect for someone like me who works from home. The only downside? The homeowners association. At first, everything was fine. I paid my dues on time and kept my yard neat. But then my trusty Explorer started showing its age. The paint began fading and a small dent appeared on the passenger door. Nothing major, but apparently enough to offend the HOA board. It started with a letter saying my vehicle didn't meet community standards. I ignored it. The car ran perfectly fine, and I wasn't about to waste money on cosmetic repairs for a 25-year-old SUV. Soon I was getting weekly notices of violation with escalating fines. One evening, the HOA president herself knocked on my door. The HOA president told me they had sent multiple notices about what she called my eyesore of a vehicle and asked when I was planning to address the issue. I replied that my car was legally registered, insured, and ran perfectly, pointing out there was nothing in the bylaws about the age of vehicles. She countered that it was about property values and neighborhood aesthetics, claiming my car brought down the entire street's appeal. When I said I wasn't getting rid of my car just because she didn't like how it looked, she threatened that they would continue issuing fines until I complied. That night, I couldn't sleep. Who were these people to tell me what kind of car I could drive? I'd worked hard to buy my house and kept my property neat. Yet here they were, threatening me over a perfectly functional vehicle. Around 3 a.m., I had my epiphany. If they thought my Explorer was an eyesore now, I'd show them what an eyesore really looked like. The next day, I moved my SUV to the public street in front of my house, where the HOA had no jurisdiction. Then I went shopping for paint in neon yellow, electric blue, hot pink, and lime green. I also bought LED strips, a new sound system, and decorative items. I transformed my SUV with swirling psychedelic patterns, installed the sound system with 80s rock anthems on loop, and added blinking LED lights. I even attached a waving mannequin arm to the roof and hung a small disco ball from the mirror. When I was done, my once boring SUV looked like something out of a fever dream. And I loved it. The HOA board's reaction was immediate. The HOA president demanded I remove what she called a monstrosity immediately. I explained that it was parked on a public street and HOA rules didn't apply there. She threatened to call the police, insisting it must violate some city ordinance. I told her that I had already checked, and as long as the vehicle was legally parked and registered, there was nothing they could do. Another board member accused me of clearly trying to harass the board and the neighborhood. I corrected them, explaining this wasn't harassment, but art, which I was calling suburban rebellion. I mentioned I was thinking of hosting a little unveiling party that weekend and that they were all invited. They took off. And true to my word, that weekend I hosted my first block party around the SUV. I invited neighbors, friends, and posted about it on social media. To my surprise, people actually showed up. Not just neighbors, but people from nearby towns who'd heard about my colorful protest. The party was a hit. We took countless selfies with Suburban Rebellion, while neighbors shared their own ridiculous HOA stories. From fines for Christmas lights on January 2nd to violations for visible recycling bins. My SUV quickly became a local sensation. People drove by just to see it. A social media page gained thousands of followers, and local news did a segment about it. The HOA tried everything, calling police, who confirmed I wasn't breaking any laws, sending cease and desist letters, and filing a lawsuit claiming my art car caused emotional distress and was devaluing property. I countersued for harassment and won. The judge ruled the HOA had engaged in targeted harassment and ordered them to pay my legal fees plus damages. The best part came when a museum curator fell in love with my creation and offered to include Suburban Rebellion in an exhibition about community art and protest. I donated the Explorer to the museum, where it sits proudly in their modern art wing. I then commissioned a life-sized fiberglass replica for my driveway, completely legal as a lawn ornament thanks to a loophole my lawyer found. Every morning, the HOA president drives past both my house and the museum on her way to work. I imagine her blood pressure rising daily as neighbors take photos with my replica, and even board members reluctantly show it to visiting relatives. The HOA board was voted out, replaced by reasonable people who focus on actual community improvements.